Well, hello there. My name is Alan Basham. I'm retired from the psychology department at Eastern Washington University, where I was fortunate to get to work with the great folks that are professors there to help train counselors. Some of you may know me as I've been a speaker for the Spokane Veterans Forum for 2 or 3 years now or longer, and while we can't meet for our monthly meetings on Thursday nights as we used to, or at least not right now, uh, several of the people who are our usual speakers and have been supportive of the forum for years um, have agreed to try to make films of 20 to 30 minutes so you'd have something to look at and consider and talk with your mentor about. So that's the purpose of my talk with you today. We're going to talk about what I call a new definition of success. In our society, success is defined mostly by money and power and status and appearance sometimes, and control over others and who's more important, all those kinds of things. And so we look at someone and say, there goes so-and-so, and they're very successful. We usually have those material and public impression and status and power things in mind. And I'm not opposed to that entirely. I think sometimes it's a bit overdone, especially when individuals look out for themselves and not for the rest of their neighbors. But when I was a younger man, about age 30, I started thinking about what success was about, and also about how I would go about evaluating my life to see if I'm on the right path. And I do this routinely. Every year I spend some time looking back over the previous year and saying, how did I do, and I'm on the right path. And I have 4 questions that I ask myself that reflect my criteria for what success is in my own life. And I thought I would bring that to you in case you'd find it helpful. One of the first, as a matter of fact, the first question I ask myself, and it's the first question on purpose, and that is, how are my relationships? When I look back over the last year, how have I been in my impact on the lives of other people around me? Or another way of asking the question, probably a little bit more stark, is, all things being equal, am I a blessing or a curse in the lives of the people around me, my friends and family and co-workers and neighbors, the people I interact with, the people I have some effect on? And my intention in evaluating my own life in this way is to be paying attention to the one thing I think is the most important. And I will say that most world religions have some form of concern about how I'm affecting my neighbor, whether it's the Golden Rule or taking care of widows and orphans, or being mindful of the needs of people who are imprisoned or who are people who are veterans because of the things that they carry that the rest of us, especially veterans, that the rest of the society might not. Anyway, I ask myself at the end of a year, how am I doing with the people around me? Are they in better shape because they've known me? Are they better off because they have known me? Or are they having to compensate for, cope with, and maybe even pick up the pieces of their life when they have been around me? Now, that's a hard thing to ask, but I think it's important. Far more important than whether or not I've made a lot of money in a given month or year is, how have I been with the people around me, especially people who have less power than me. That would be who? In some cases, elders, children, people who have less money and opportunity, maybe in education, but people over whom I could have a very positive influence if I would pay attention to it. So I want to protect those who need more protecting, and respect and honor and empower people who have a hard time finding that in their own lives because of the hand they've been dealt often. So that's what I ask myself first, is how are my relationships? How am I doing with people? My dad was a great guy. He was not very big. He was about 5'6", tough, wiry, hard-working. He's kind of a Colorado cowboy is what he called himself, although he worked most of his life in factories so he could make enough money even as a high school educated guy, make enough money to support his family. And one day, on a Saturday when I was 12, my dad went into town, which is what we used to do back then, actually go pay the light bill and the phone bill and the electricity and all of that. So he went into town to do a little grocery shopping and pay the bills, as he said, and my mother was at work. And he told my two brothers and I was the middle of three there, that we needed to get our chores done before we played. And so I wanted to get mine done so I could go on a bike ride and just kind of be free on a Saturday morning. My brothers wanted to watch cartoons, so they sat down in front of the TV on a Saturday morning, and I divided up my share of the work and got their agreement with it. I got mine done and I took off. When my dad got home, he came to the conclusion, because my brothers did not correct him, tell him what really happened, he came to the conclusion that my brothers, who jumped up and started working right away, had been there being obedient sons, and that I had basically done the opposite. So my dad met me at the door with a belt. It's the last spanking I ever got, and he had lost his temper. And he realized, after my brothers finally fessed up to what had happened, that he had made a mistake, and a big one. And that's not who he was. I will never forget my dad standing in the doorway with the tears streaming down his face, and he did not cry readily. I've only seen him cry 3 times in my life, and that was one of them. Another was when his own father died. And he could be there for me because it mattered more to him whether or not he had hurt me than his own pride mattered to him. A lot of parents would have just said, oh, you know, that's for all the times I didn't catch you what you were doing wrong. But my dad apologized and asked my forgiveness. He said I should never have spanked you without talking to you and listening to your side of the story. I should never have done it when I was angry. And I have no excuse, but I want you to forgive me. And I give you my word, it will never happen again. And it didn't. So whatever else is true about my dad, and nobody's perfect, but he was a person of honor who put my well-being, when he thought about it, ahead of his own pride. And that takes some doing. So I learned from him, how are my relationships? Am I helping you or hurting you by the way I'm being in your life? The second question I ask myself is about whether or not I am growing and changing and maturing. Over the course of my life, am I growing, not just physically, of course, am I growing, or am I just getting older? You know, if you stay around long enough, your body will eventually break down. It kind of goes in the opposite direction eventually of where youthful strength and energy are. But our spirit, our soul, our mind, our person can grow over the course of years. And just like a caterpillar that's basically like a hairy centipede, it has to decide that it's not just going to munch its way to the end of the universe through the leaf patch. It's going to actually hang upside down on a branch somewhere behind a leaf, spin a chrysalis around itself, and go through some very significant change, which, if you were to look at it carefully, inside the chrysalis, it's not a caterpillar and it's not a butterfly, it's a mess. But sometimes when we're going through change and healing and becoming different, we are kind of a mess at times, and that's okay. Everybody goes through those kinds of places. So are we actually growing and becoming what we were intended to be? Even butterflies know that's what's supposed to happen. Even fawns born in the spring, they lose their spots when they no longer need that camouflage and become solid brown like their parents and able to run. So we all change over the course of our life. The question is, in what direction? You know, it's possible to get worse and less mature and more grumpy and harsh over the course of our lives. Most people don't, but it is possible. When we get old, one of the things that we have to face is whether or not we are grateful for life and whether we've been on the path that we are proud of and can feel okay about. So our third question is, while I'm monitoring how I'm being with others and whether I'm dealing with whether I'm growing or not, maturing, Third question is, am I making a difference somewhere? Am I involved somewhere, even if it's being a good parent, if it's volunteering at school, if it's supporting my neighbors, if it's visiting someone elder who's a shut-in, if it's showing up to help people, with Habitat for Humanity, or maybe it's just routinely getting together with a group of people who need companionship and communication and making their lives better. But the question is, am I making a difference somewhere? Mother Teresa, who received the Nobel Peace Prize, largely, but not exclusively, but largely because of her work with the poor and downtrodden in India, she was asked on a day when she was just pouring clear water from a big concrete cistern, the water that had been purified, instead of their having to drink the polluted water, grossly polluted water they're running through Calcutta. She was giving clean water to people. And when asked if everybody else ought to stop what they're doing and come and help her or do something similar, I'm paraphrasing here, but she replied, no, but you can do a lot of good if you just do little things with love. And that's what I'm talking about, is applied effort at making the world a better place. Where am I, whether it's sheltering animals or taking care of, maybe picking up trash out on the trail when I'm out in the park. Whatever it is, am I paying attention to my impact on the world and trying to have a good impact? That's question number 3. Whatever you're doing, you ought to be doing it with love. You can do a lot if you do little things, Mother Teresa says, with love. Am I making a difference somewhere? Am I leaving a good legacy, or just looking out for number 1? And the last thing, of course, is that 4th question, and that is, am I enjoying life? Am I grateful to get a chance to even be here? One of my imaginings is that of, if I was asked before I was born, try to imagine with me, if I was given the option of coming here and experiencing life with all of its difficulties and challenges and surprises, some of them wonderful and some of them not so, would I come from wherever I was to Earth and live a life from the cradle to the grave in order to experience it? And my answer clearly is, and I, like you, have had some difficult things in my life. But my answer would be absolutely. Because as I sit here thinking about the trees behind me in the park, or my wife's flower garden in front of me, which you can't see, but I can, I'd like to be able to see this and to experience this. And I would really miss not getting to know some of the people I've come to know who are wonderful. So even though it's difficult, the term the valley of the shadow is quite appropriate for a lot of our situations. And sometimes life is really joyous, and sometimes it's just plain tough. And sometimes it's crystal clear, and sometimes it's very confusing. The question is, looking back over my year, am I glad I got to be here? And am I grateful that I'm alive and even have a life to consider in the first place? As we get older, like I said, our bodies gradually break down. I'm 72, and I know I don't look a day over 50, and it's very kind of you to say so. But, the body basically lets you know you've been around a while. There's 2 kinds of people, though, as we get older. You find some elders, if you've met, they're just bitter and whiny and complaining. And I'm not talking about their physical ailments. That's enough to make anybody complain sometimes. But I'm talking about people who just are unhappy about life. It didn't turn out the way they wanted, and they didn't get what all of what they wanted or even needed, and maybe it's been hard for them. I get all that. But they're just tough to be around, and they're not enjoying even their declining years because they're basically made a choice somewhere along the line to be negative and bitter and dissatisfied, instead of accepting and learning and growing and making peace with life. And then there are those who, no matter how hard life is, seem to find the joy in it, and there's a glow about them even as they age, and it has everything to do with wisdom. Wisdom begins, I think, with the understanding that we don't know everything, and that life is going to be difficult sometimes, and that nobody, beginning with ourselves, but also extending to others, nobody's perfect. And every person I've ever known and loved has made mistakes in my life, and that's how it is. I've made mistakes in theirs. So the real question is, all things being equal, am I glad to be here? Am I grateful? See, we're talking about gratitude. Am I grateful to get to have a life at all, even if it's hard? So those are my 4 questions that have to do with what I think is successful. Successful people are mindful of the people around them, and they treat them accordingly. Successful people, as I wrote in Doc's Corner, they deal with kind of who they are and what's going on in their life. They do some self-evaluation. You know, am I growing or just getting older? Successful people make a difference in the world. May not be spectacular, but they're certainly not just looking out for number 1. And successful people look around them even on difficult days and go, all things being what they are, I'd rather be here than not have a chance to live. And I'm going to set my attitudes accordingly. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. And I'll close by telling you about a friend of mine named Sarge. I call him that because, like me, I wasn't a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I was an E-5 Navy corpsman, Devil Doc, but nonetheless, I call him Sarge because, like me, he's kind of beat up. Sarge was a German Shepherd Malamute mix. He looked like, if you can imagine the size of that dog in a male, he looked like Rin Tin Tin on steroids. He was a big boy. Very friendly, very loving, very kind, but you would not want to mess with him if you messed with his alpha. You know, that would be me. Big boy, very kind, very gentle, very well behaved, but real adventurous. And Chinook was his name. I just called him Sarge as a nickname. Chinook was born with real bad hip dysplasia. We had one surgically altered. It's the only one that they could do much about. And so he always ran with kind of a little rabbit hop in his back legs. But he was used to it, so it was okay. And he loved being out in the woods. We put a pack on him, and he could backpack right uphill with us, go all day. He was just a little slower on the run. He was also blind in one eye from birth. His optic nerve on his right eye never attached to the back of his eyeball. He only had one eye, one field of vision. And, you know, he didn't know that. And he nonetheless managed to play and to sniff things out in the woods and to have a happy life. And he also had a genetic systemic joint disease. See, we got him at 8 weeks of age, so we didn't know any of this. That's okay. We'd have bought him anyway. We'd have taken him in anyway. But Chinook was also had a genetic joint disease, and our veterinarian, a great guy, said, you know, you'd be lucky if you do everything right with the right meds and exercise and treatment. He might make it to 5 years and have quality of life. Well, he made it to 7.5. Systemic joint disease got him, and it basically crashed him. He could either be doped up with the pain and then be sedentary, which was no life for a dog like him, or he could say it's been good, and I had to say it for him and let him go. But he was such a happy, playful, enthusiastic, adventurous dog. A big boy that I love dearly, as you can tell. And he had a great life, in part, and I know this is where the analogy might break down, but in part because he didn't become bitter. He stayed friendly and loving and caring and adventurous. Was also protective, you know, that's never going to go away, and a little bit gun-shy with strangers. Never aggressive, just a little unsure, and that's okay. He'd had a hard time. And so Chinook is a prime example of, even when life is hard, you can be happy and playful and enthused and feel like it's okay to be here. He's a great teacher in that sense. So those are my 4 questions. Are my relationships, am I a blessing or curse in the lives of others? Am I growing or just getting older? Am I making a difference somewhere? And am I grateful for the life that I'm living, even when it's hard? Well, bless you. I hope your life's going okay, that you're being safe, taking care of yourself. Watch out for little ones and elders especially. And take care of yourself. Right? I look forward very much to being back at the forum meetings with you. And I don't know about you, but I'll be open for hugs. Take care of yourself. This is Doc signing off.